Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. Thank you so much for joining us. On this week's episode, we continue the road to the White House. We're speaking with Mia Reid, who is a mental health specialist who spoke at Vice President Kamala Harris's rally in Metro Detroit recently. She's going to talk to us about the essence of Kamala Harris's candidacy as the Democratic nominee for president. We're also speaking with Elnora Gavin from the Southwestern part of Michigan, from the great city of Benton Harbor, a member of the Benton Harbor School Board and a racial justice advocate, about how the 2024 election is playing out in Benton Harbor. And then my interview with Kimberly Ann Thomas, one of the top contenders for the Michigan Supreme Court in this 2024 election cycle. It's all coming up here on Bankole's Nation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Bankole's Nation. Let's bring in Mia Reid. She's a clinical mental health therapist here in Metro Detroit, but also she's been actively working to address the issue of gun violence. And most recently, she was at one of the Democratic presidential campaign rallies for Vice President Kamala Harris, where she also spoke and introduced the Vice President, who is the Democratic nominee for president. Mia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to begin by asking you, as a Black woman, how important it is to you to have Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. You appeared at a campaign rally for her recently in Metro Detroit. Not only did you speak, but you also introduced, I saw videos of that. Talk about the significance of this election.
It is inspiring. It is hopeful to see someone that looks like me as vice president, and to send that message to all the Black girls in America, to motivate them, to let them know that they too can aspire to the highest office in this land. It's hope is what it is.
Right. And I think I hear that, all over people are saying that. And I think that's what makes Vice President Harris's candidacy extraordinary. The fact that she will be the first Black woman, the first woman of Asian descent to head, a major party as their nominee. And this idea that little Black girls can look up to her, and I want to drill on that a little bit in terms of just from a Black woman's perspective here. Talk to our viewers and our listeners on this podcast. What do you think sometimes is missing about realizing the power of Black women?
I think there's always been this stigma for Black women. As Malcolm X said, Black women are the most disrespected in this country, but we are also, and it is not said enough, we are also the most educated right now in this country. So to see another educated woman, another capable woman, she has already shown what she is capable of. And to see someone with that type of power that looks like me, that is not just saying I can do it, she's doing it. And so I support her, and I support any Black woman that aspires to do more. And I'm just hoping that the rest of the country can look at her not only as a Black woman, but also as a powerful woman.
Yeah, no, and I see your point. So let's go to the campaign though, because and I know how covering someone who has covered presidential campaigns, I know how difficult it is. for campaigns to pick individuals who will speak. There is normally research that goes behind it. They're very meticulous. They're very careful who comes to that podium to speak. And you don't need to tell us the selection process, how you were recruited to speak, but talk about just the moment of you speaking at Vice President Harris's campaign recently in Metro Detroit. And not only did you speak, but you also introduced her. Talk about that.
I felt so honored to have that call to action, and I didn't hesitate. It was a hard yes for me. It was easy. It was easy to do, and there was a lot of adrenaline because I wanted her to be proud of me. I think one of the reasons I was chosen is because our vice president is culturally competent, and she understands the plight of Black America, of Black women, of Black children, of the communities. And because she knows my history, and because she's so engaged in helping families that have been impacted by gun violence, she did not just start this. We've been having these conversations for many years with her. As a matter of fact, she's been working with our president, and she was instrumental in us having the very first White House gun violence office, the first White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. That is huge. We've never had anything like that. We have been working, and you know this, we've been working boots on the ground organizations in our communities. When they say we don't do anything, we are doing it. We are boots on the ground, and we have been working in our communities to prevent gun violence and to help families. And finally, I feel heard.
No, that's very powerful. You finally feel heard. And let's go into that a little bit, because I think it's so important that we talk about just the victims of gun violence, but also what is missing in the newspaper headlines, the evening news, is the mothers of those kids who get shot, who get maimed, and by that, and the trauma that they go through. And sometimes that doesn't come to the fore. And normally we don't see that many conversation around the mothers who, crying day in and day out about just losing a child or losing two kids.
Absolutely. We get a lot of headlines, of course, on mass shootings, right, and we use that to our advantage to get some laws on the books that are going to help reduce gun violence. What I like about our vice president is that because of the new Office of Gun Violence Prevention, she has also been focusing on community gun violence and the CVI work, the community violence intervention work, and not only focusing on it, funding that work so that we are able to be consistent on the ground. She understands that poverty, if we address gun violence and we fund resources to prevent gun violence and we leave poverty out of the piece, we're just going to have a recycle of the violence eventually. And what I like about the vice president is that she's listening about the poverty aspect. And so in her plan, she's addressing some of those areas of poverty, because I believe myself that poverty is the culprit of gun violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the culprit. No question. So you were on the stage speaking, and what was the reaction between? What was the reaction of the vice president? You can share it with us after you spoke.
I think she was pleased. We didn't have a long interaction because I was leaving and she was on her way to give her speech, but I believe she was pleased. And for that, I'm happy. I can say mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Let's talk about the last 2 weeks now before the election. How important it is that the vice president gets elected for Black women like you. Talk about that.
First
And the
and
issue of gun
foremost,
violence that you've been pushing, gun violence prevention.
first and foremost, it is extremely important that the vice president gets elected for the whole country. For Black people and for Black women in particular, it is extremely important for us. We're finally seeing some movement on us elevating. And to me, it's my own opinion. It seems that every time Black women or Black men seem to elevate, then there's something that happens to pull us back down. And so having our vice president in office with the plan that she's laid out to us, I think it's going to elevate us even more. We deserve that.
Yeah, and she has come under heavy attack from the opposition, Republicans, and of course, her chief rival, Donald Trump, and all of that. As a Black woman, do you relate to some of those attacks that you think the vice president has come under?
I do.
We've seen Trump called her saying she's not that smart, and for the life of me, I don't understand how anybody in their right mind can call a woman who was Attorney General of the state of California, which is the largest law firm, if you're the Attorney General of the state of California, was a U.S. Senator, to say she's not smart. Can you relate as a Black woman to the insults that you've seen Vice President Kamala Harris has weathered during this campaign?
Yes, I can. She's already proven herself. She has a track record. She has her credentials behind her name. We know that she's currently sitting in the office of the vice presidency. So we know she's smart and capable. Yes, this is familiar. And so many other insults.
Yeah. Let's talk about Michigan and, of course, Detroit, Oakland County. A lot of people are banking on Michigan to swing this election to ensure that the vice president gets elected. The road to the White House, we're told, sometimes begins with Michigan, and actually really begins with Detroit, because this is the largest Democratic base and all of that. Talk about just the importance of that for those who are listening and watching this conversation here, the importance of getting out the vote.
It is extremely important. I can say this to everyone. I think everyone right now is inspired. I know I am. We're doing the work, we're canvassing, we're phone banking, we're sending out postcards, we're talking to family members, we're talking to friends, and everyone is saying they're going to vote. Saying you're going to vote and actually voting are two different things. So I think it is very important for everyone to make a plan to vote. Vote early. Just get it out the way. No excuses. You don't have to worry about taking off work. Saturdays are going to be an option to vote. I would say if you have a ballot, take it to the clerk's office and you're done. And you don't have to worry about coming up with a plan later. The best option is to vote early and to actually vote. We can't just say, I'm going to vote. We actually need to vote. We need to talk to our younger family members that are 18 and older and explain to them how important it is at this moment in time to vote, because I believe our freedom is on the line.
Let me ask you this. Last week I had Congressman Jonathan Jackson from Chicago, from Illinois, on this podcast, on this conversation about the role that Black men are going to play in this election, and he doesn't seem to buy it. That he thinks that much hype is being created around Black men, sitting on the sidelines. He doesn't think that would happen. How do you feel about this conversation about Black men, some Black men swaying towards Trump? I mean, do you believe that? Do you think it's a media creation? Do you think that, it's much ado about nothing?
I think there's some truth to it, but I think that's a small percentage. I think the average Black man that has always voted is going to vote again, and they're going to vote for their best interests. And if they have done the research, if they have listened, like Maya Angelou said, when someone tells you believe them, if you're listening, you're going to understand. And so I have faith in our Black men. I'm not going to say, and I don't, I am intentional about not saying anything negative about our Black men. They have a lot in their backpack as is. I think we need to keep encouraging them and supporting them, and them hearing us and us saying to them, we know you're going to make the right choice. And everything else is just
sounds like you need to be aside from introducing the vice president and speaking at her rally, you need to be an official surrogate of the Kamala Harris campaign right there. No, but I mean, you made a very interesting point, because Congressman Jonathan Jackson said the same thing about lifting up Black men. I want to give you an opportunity to give me your final comments in terms of just this election in general, aside from gun violence, which you have always been known for fighting for gun violence prevention. Any other issue that is on your mind with this election coming up?
I do want to say this. There are some barriers for some of our Black people that are struggling. Some of them want to vote. They don't have a right to vote. I have a link that I would like to share with you, and I hope you would be willing to share it with your listeners, and they can get a right to vote. We have some families that they want to vote, but that is not a priority for them. Their most basic needs are not being met. Ask people, how are you? How can I help? Some people need food. Some people need clothing and shoes for their children. And their focus is on that, not on voting. So if everyone's most basic needs are met, then they can focus on voting. They can even focus on their own mental health and self-care. So I also would like to share with you a link of our nonprofit, the Charles W. Reid Community Health Center, and we provide resources for families, basic need items. When people's most basic needs are met, they feel more empowered to do more for themselves.
Okay, great. And send me that link. We'll have it up there for our listeners. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk for us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course.
I'm not on my parents' health insurance anymore, and I work for myself doing a bit of everything. So I found a plan for just $34 a month.
All plans cover doctor visits, prescriptions, emergency care, and more. Healthcare.gov is here for you. Enroll by December 15th.
Welcome back to Bankole's Nation. Our guest is one of the most active, courageous voices in the southwestern part of the state of Michigan, from the great city of Benton Harbor. She's a racial justice advocate and also a member of the Benton Harbor Area School Board. Elnora Gavin, who is no stranger to us here in the Metro Detroit area. And of course, for those of you who are listening to her now on this national podcast, she's been one of the leading voices in the southwestern part of Michigan. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I just appreciate all of the racial justice work that you have done all over the nation and the globe. So it's an honor to be here again, Bankole.
Likewise. And I wanted to have you on, Elnora, because with the election coming up, the presidential election, and we talk about Black Michigan, urban Michigan, we talk about urban communities around the nation. People are looking up to Georgia, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., and you name it. urban centers around the nation. Benton Harbor is one of our urban communities, just like Flint, Saginaw, Detroit, you name it. How is this election playing out in Benton Harbor?
I would say that this election is super important in Benton Harbor. This is a historic election. And of course, Black Michigan and Benton Harbor having a population of over 85% Black residents are looking at this election as an opportunity for serious change. We are expecting that Kamala Harris will deliver not only on the Black vote, but a Black agenda. She has indicated her endorsement for reparations. And so I would say that it's important not only for her to deliver on that, but it's important for us to be organized around it and to make sure that she delivers on it and that she understands that that is a top priority, regardless of whether the moderators of the debates fail to mention reparations plan, anything about land for Black folks, or anything about financial reparations or education justice or education reparations in that regard. Regardless of their failure to mention it during the debates, that is a serious conversation around our community in Benton Harbor, Michigan.
Right. No question. Reparatory justice. And let's dig into that a little bit, because I think that's was a big issue in 2020 when Biden was running, reparations and so forth among the Democratic candidates who were running for president. Do you feel that we are at a point now in this nation, and of course in this election, where the issue of reparatory justice can no longer be ignored?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're in a stage in which, because of social media, because of access to Google and information, we have access to information in ways that we never had before.
Right.
And people are aware of a debt owed. People are starting to understand what reparations is, even though it's not being taught in our schools. Lifelong learners are starting to educate themselves, and they understand that reparations was offered to slave owners, those who owned slaves, if you can own a person, but they were never offered to, it was offered, but that promise was never kept when it came to the descendants of slaves. And so it is time for us to go ahead and make good on that. And there's a great case for that. And it's time. It will help enrich the entire country. When we only make up about 14% of the population, but when you right that wrong, we are the people who are the consumers. We are the ones who will stimulate the economy. It will give us an opportunity to pull ourselves up in the way that we deserve. We have great innovations, great ideas, and those ideas need to be funded. And we also deserve land. I think that Kamala Harris understands that. I know that there has been misinformation about that. I know that maybe at one time she wasn't as strong on it as she could have been. But I would say that she has looked at it from a space of the mental health aspect. When you look at post-traumatic slave syndrome, there was a lot of mental pain that came from reparations. There was never a real comprehensive system to repair those generations of pain that impacted us economically. And so I think that if you really invest in that way, I know that we will be able to thrive, and we deserve to thrive. And so I think that that's our number one priority. Is definitely my number one priority. And it's what we've been talking about all over Benton Harbor. It's time to make good on that. I'm glad that she has a Black male agenda. I've been taking a look at that. And so I'm glad that she's looking to do something to help our men become entrepreneurs and just have a leg up to be able to do what they need to do for their families as well. So I'm excited about that. And I think we can expand on it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. You talk about the post-traumatic slavery. I mean, that reflects, the writings of Naim Akbar and other scholars who have been in that space talking about that. But looking at Benton Harbor itself, it's a microcosm of the challenges that urban America faces. And, if you want to solve the problem of urban America, obviously, Benton Harbor is one of those places that you could go to. If the vice president and the Democratic nominee is listening to this podcast right now as we speak, what would you like her to know about the city of Benton Harbor?
I would say that Benton Harbor deserves investment. There has been a strategic attack on our community. Our median household income is $16,000. And it is not because our people are not willing to work. It is not because our people are not, amazingly innovative. It is because, like you said, Benton Harbor has been the microcosm of America. We sit in the heart of Michigan. And one of the biggest conservative think tanks is in Michigan. And we have been ground zero. Benton Harbor and Detroit have been ground zero for a lot of those tactics that are playing out in the country. And so what I would say is invest in your Black communities like Benton Harbor, and you will see what is possible when you center the ideas of the people most impacted by the worst tactics that America has had to offer over the years. Our people have overcome so much in the city, and all it takes is a little bit of investment here, and we can come up with the ideas to transform the United States of America. We have changed. They wanted to shut down our schools, our public schools. And when you look at Project 2025, a lot of that are tactics that have been played out in Benton Harbor. Yeah. Shutting down, privatizing public schools. We fought against that as a community to keep our schools open and to reroute the dollars into our schools. And so it's just, if you give us a little bit of opportunity, we know how to multiply that tenfold. I'm just excited about what's possible. Kamala Harris is the only person on the ballot nationally, as far as we're concerned, in that regard. And what I would say is she still has a ways to go. She still has a ways to go in regards to Palestine. I'm not going to back down on that issue. I think that she can do better in that regard. And I would also say that, locally, we need to be paying attention to what's going on with our school district as well, because it's all connected. And we're excited to have some folks on the ballot who can help bring our schools back to life also.
Yeah, let's talk about the role of the role of the Black woman, the age of the Black woman. To have a Black woman of Kamala Harris standing as the standard bearer for the Democratic Party in 2024, and that in itself is significant on so many levels. When you take it back to the Constitutional Convention, whether it's 1776 to 1778, whatever it is. Talk about the significance of that, because I know you've always tried to underscore the significance and the contributions of Black women.
Absolutely. I'm excited, one, because she's a graduate of Howard University, fellow alum. There's something about a Black woman, a conscious Black woman, not just any Black woman. But there's something about a Black woman who understands the pain of the men, the boys. Everybody comes from us. And so we feel a deep responsibility for the entire nation and the globe. And so when you get a conscious Black woman in office, that woman is going to be a listener. They're going to center their campaign in a space of joy. And that's what I've seen with Kamala Harris. I think that she's done a good job of addressing, and they're going to hold people accountable, right? A Black woman is closest to the problems and the ills of America. And so we have spent a lot of time thinking about the solutions, caring about the solutions, and listening to the solutions. And we have empathy. A conscious Black woman has empathy for the world. We think about, what is it going to be like if my child goes out that door? How should the police treat them? What experience should they have at school? What experience should our husbands have on the job? And so when you put a conscious Black woman in office, you have someone who has not a narcissistic type of leadership, but an empathetic type of leadership who actually listens, cares, and is concerned about solving problems. And so that's what I'm excited about. That's what I've been listening for. And so what I would say is, it's important for us to make sure that Kamala Harris remembers who she is on this trail and when she gets in office, and that those progressive voices are heard and permeated throughout. And that, I know that folks are trying to move her, one way or the other, but it's important for a Black woman to be centered in our Blackness and our responsibility to our community and the nation, because we birthed this nation.
Yeah.
And the
well, let me ask you this question though, and I want to know which one bifurcates, because sometimes we talk about progress and we talk about taking 2 steps backwards, right? And suddenly we have a lot of issues in this nation. We have a lot of issues in Black America. Would you see it as progress to say that in 2024, you and I are alive to see a Black woman become the nominee of the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I would say is, what I love about how you cover news and cover stories is that you make sure that the people who are at the center of the solutions have a stage, have an opportunity for their stories and their voices to be heard. America has done, a job of erasing the contributions of our people and making people feel like we have not made any progress. We have definitely made progress for us to be able to see a conscious Black woman applying for this position and being in a space where she can actually get this position. And so to see Barack Obama in my lifetime, and then to see Kamala Harris possibly become the first Black woman president in the United States, that is progress. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. Reparations is old. And so we need to get to that space. We need to correct the ills of this nation. And that happens together. She can't do it by herself. You have to have a full, you have to have the House and the Senate, and we need to be making sure we're paying attention to the judges and local elections. And, it's like people know who they want to. They know all of the positions of basketball players and football players and their stats and all of that, and they make sure they assemble that team properly. We need to do the same thing when it comes to politics. We need to mind the business that pays us when it comes to politics, and we need to make sure we assemble our team so that she has a proper team behind her when she takes that office as well. So pay attention to everything on that ballot, research and find out who the real ones are in your community.
That's a great sports analogy, Elnora Gavin from the great city of Benton. 2 more quick questions, though, for you. And I've been asking this to people that I've been interviewing about just, especially Black women. How do you receive the insults that she's taken from Donald Trump, saying she's not smart? I mean, all kinds of, how do you receive it? Do you roll your eyes? Do you just smile? Do you just dust it off like this? How do you receive it as a Black woman?
Donald Trump is projecting himself. And so I'm familiar with politicians who project their shortcomings onto their opponents who are better than them, significantly better than them. And so that's who he is. And I laugh at him, but I also understand that there are some people who take him seriously. And so it has to be addressed. And I would say that Kamala Harris has done a phenomenal job of, indicating that his movements are weird and creepy. And she's been able to kind of reposition that conversation into her policy ideas, the Black male agenda, investing in entrepreneurship, holding price gougers accountable to, raising ridiculous prices on groceries, making sure that working class communities have union protections and different things of that nature. So I would say he's just trying to distract with drama, and she does a great job of pivoting right back to the matters that the things that matter most at our kitchen tables. And so that's what I tell folks to do as well. He's projecting, and that's what narcissists do.
Yeah, and one more on the issue of kitchen table before we round up this interview. What other issues are on your mind here, with only 2 weeks to go before the election?
2 weeks ago, right now, I'm working on, you had someone, a gentleman from Flint on your show before who recently passed away, Eric
Mays, yeah,
Eric Mays.
former city councilman, yes.
I watched that interview, and he talked about not having the proper balance of power at that city council table. And when you have the proper balance of power, you can get a lot of things done fast. Solutions can move fast when you don't have, when you have a majority of folks who are unified. And so right now, my focus is on our local election. We have some school board candidates, Kimberly Brown, Joseph Bullocks, and Clyde Collins, who are in alignment with mental health for our children and staff, making sure that they have mental well-being. They spend so many hours in school, and we need to make sure that there's some investments in their mental well-being, upgrading our facilities so that they have everything that people across the bridge have, making sure that they have a safe learning environment, making sure we get those class sizes down to 15 students to 1 teacher so that they can actually focus on learning, be in a safe environment, develop a real relationship with those teachers, and bringing back those careers and trade opportunities for the youth and the adults. And being in a space of 5 folks on that board, unified, putting through a comprehensive agenda so that things like privatizing education doesn't happen in Benton Harbor, so that we can offer a strong public education for our kids. So most parents, that's what we're thinking about at that kitchen table. My baby is at school 6 to 8 hours a day. I want to make sure he's getting everything that he deserves. And so as a board member, it's my responsibility to make sure that when I look to my left and my right, I have a unified board that is going to make sure that those things happen. And we have a president who's also going to make sure that there are investments in public education and that she protects public education, unlike a Trump who put Betsy DeVos, over education, whose goal was to dismantle education, right? Who also put Engler in charge of standardized testing. And so all of those pieces go together, your presidential, your state legislators, and of course, your local elections, which impact you directly.
Well, someone said that to serve the people, you have to love the people. To serve Black people, you have to love Black folk. And sometimes we do have public officials who are Black, who are in office, who don't love Black folk, but they're in office. And, I think the biblical saying, by their fruits you shall know them. So
that's right. That's
right. Well, thank you so much, Elnora, for being here.
It's always an honor to be in your presence, Bankole. You're an amazing, great man. Thank you for all you do, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. We'll have you back to delve more into all that you're doing in Benton Harbor.
Thank you so much.
Clean place. The meals twice a day are amazing. I couldn't be happier. The guys who are in the facility right now, the Red Cross team, they have been amazing. They have bent over backwards to make sure that we have enough to eat, make sure that we have enough to drink, in any way that they can accommodate us. And that if there's one thing that I can pass on to people, you call the Red Cross. They would take care of you. The American Red Cross does it right.
Welcome back to Bankole's Nation. Joining us now is Kimberly Ann Thomas, who is a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School, where she runs the Juvenile Justice Clinic, and where the law students represent people who cannot afford lawyers. Her experience representing low-income Michiganders and teaching students the ethical practice of law will help her bring a voice of integrity and knowledge to the Michigan Supreme Court. She served on the bipartisan Michigan Task Force on Juvenile Justice Reform, which took data-driven approach to understanding and making recommendations for improvements of our state's judicial system. She's one of the top contenders, of course, running on the Democratic slate for the Michigan Supreme Court. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School. Kimberly Ann Thomas, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Likewise. And so I want to delve in. There's so much I want to touch on with you, but let's begin with your background and the work that you do on juvenile justice, because it's a very strong terminology. It has a lot of resonance in both urban and rural Michigan. Let's talk about that. Juvenile justice.
Yeah. So I teach at the University of Michigan Law School, and the work that I do there is the practice of law with students. And so students in their second and third can take a class where they actually learn the practice of law. They go to court with me. They, actually work with real clients in the world. And so we serve people who are court involved and at our juvenile court system. And there, really, there are a lot of issues across the state. Some of the things that we learned was that we didn't really know that much about, we didn't have very much data about what our juvenile court systems look like. And so learning about what was happening across the state, some of that was learning about fantastic local innovations. And some of it was, thinking about how we can make our system more fair across the board. And so some of that variance doesn't feel fair to people who are in the system. They felt like, if it's different in one county versus another based on your zip code more than based on what you deserved or how the system should work.
Right. And, and I think when we talk about the justice system, sometimes the conversation that comes up, and many times or too many times is those who are left out of the system, those who perhaps feel powerless before the system, who feel like, they have to have resources to be able to defend themselves and have the appropriate kind of legal representation to defend themselves before the court. And now you're running for the Michigan Supreme Court with this background of juvenile justice and standing in the gap for those who normally don't have that kind of legal representation. I'm curious, though, in terms of how important you think that is for the Michigan Supreme Court right now.
Yeah, so, some of that value of making sure that everybody feels like they get a fair hearing before the court, and that hearing doesn't depend on how much money you bring, how famous you are, who that's a really core rule of law value, right? That we need to make sure that our system reflects this idea that people don't think it's based on, these irrelevant factors about our court system. And so I'm excited to run for the court. I think that's an important value that I have lived in my 25 years as a lawyer, and that, we do need our court system to reflect. And I think there's a lot of great things in our court. And there's also, there's concerns, I'd say, around the country. People's confidence in our court system is,
Right.
under criticism, and making sure that we uphold those values so that people can be confident in their courts is incredibly important.
And I want to talk about the trust with our institutions, but let's dig a little bit deeper into, because you've been crisscrossing the state, urban and rural Michigan. What is it that you're hearing from voters and people who are talking to you who have a particular interest in the Michigan Supreme Court? Because I said it to say that even, in the regular political cycle, when people vote, the Michigan Supreme Court is one of those rare places where people actually do split their ballot. They don't normally vote for the same candidates that they're voting for when it comes to Attorney General, Secretary of State, Governor, and so forth. When it comes to the Supreme Court, people do split their ballot, which underscores the significance that the court has, in our lives as a state. What are you hearing from voters across the length and breadth of Michigan about that?
Yeah. Yes, I think I'm hearing things in two different spaces. So
Okay.
One, I'm hearing questions and concerns about the important decisions that the court makes. And so I think that we have seen cases around the country where state Supreme Court decisions are really driving home the importance of our state Supreme Courts to people and sort of their, foundational rights and freedoms. And so people are attentive to the Michigan Supreme Court, I think more than maybe previously, to the impact of the state Supreme Court and the decisions it makes interpreting our state laws and our state constitution. And so I definitely hear questions about that, what impact that has. And so there's certainly those like big picture, high profile questions. I'm hearing those. Then I would say the other thing that I hear is, most people aren't going to the Michigan Supreme Court with their cases. Most people across Michigan, if they're going to court, they're interacting with their local district court or their local circuit court. And that's their concern, right? Their concern is my local court going to treat me fairly? Am I going to have access to my local court? Am I going to, be treated with respect if I have to go to my local court by the judge who's there or by the system that's there?
But the Michigan Supreme Court has this overarching administrative role over the courts, over all of our courts.
Right. And so that's where that administrative leadership, I think, is important, making sure that our Michigan Supreme Court justices are thinking about those questions, like how can we work with all of those local stakeholders, work with local court systems to ensure that people, when they experience their local courts, feel like they're getting a fair hearing there too. It's not just the high profile cases. It's thinking about that whole structure of our court system.
And I want to get into your judicial philosophy of what the court, in your view, should represent, because in any state, the high court, in our case, is the Michigan Supreme Court. It's the final arbiter for justice. It's the last place that people go to seek help. Like you said, and special cases come before the Supreme Court. Not every case, and the court, of course, has the discretion to choose whether it wants to hear a case or not. Share with me your judicial philosophy here in terms of what should the court system, a competent court of jurisprudence, what should it look like to you?
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think
does
our
the Supreme Court look like in your view?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much related to that, making sure that people have confidence in our court system. And so what it looks like is, reading the laws that the people have implemented through our state legislatures, understanding that we're bound by the Constitution and the constitutional provisions that the people of Michigan have put into place. Giving opinions that are that explain things clearly, that are transparent, that don't, you hear about shadow dockets and all these things, so that are really forthright with the people of Michigan about the decisions that are being made and open about those decisions and the reasons for them. I mean, I think that's really the values that our Michigan Supreme Court needs to have.
Going back to the juvenile justice and given that background that you hope to bring to the court, if you get elected, should you get elected, and when you get elected in November, in the cases that you've dealt with, and you don't have to speak to the specifics of the case, but what was perhaps the most instructive of some of the cases that you have dealt with in juvenile justice that has left perhaps an indelible mark on your mind relating to the rule of law and the system of jurisprudence?
Yeah, I think for me, I've spent a lot of time representing people who did not have financial means in our court system. And the ability to feel like they had a fair process and that they were able to present their case in the best light possible is an incredibly important thing. And for then a court to hear that, to, deliberate on that and to make a decision. And lots of times people get decisions they don't like, but if they believed that they had a process that was fair to them, that's really foundational. That helps instill more trust in our courts than if there's not a fair process. And so that really I take with me, having been with clients in the court system,
right.
Making, that sort of belief that there's someone listening to their case, that it's a fair process, is really what I take with me from, the work I've done up and down our state court system.
So let me ask you this question too, because this has come up a lot in the past, and that is how the court is viewed. Whether it's the Michigan Supreme Court, the Michigan Court of Appeals, the Third Circuit Court, the Wayne County Circuit Court, you name it, 36th District Court, Oakland County Circuit Court. People generally, a lot of people, or a significant number of people, are fearful of the court. They have this, they're very apprehensive of the court itself. It's not a harmless institution. It's something that invokes or provokes a lot of fear in them. And some people argue saying that, that gives people a negative view of the court. I'm curious about just your take on that in terms of how, the average individual views the court.
Yeah, so I mean, most people would rather not deal with our courts, right? It's unfortunately, I mean, the courts are set up to provide a mechanism to resolve conflicts in a way that is fair and that gives process to everyone involved, right? It's a way for society to resolve conflicts, to get an outcome, and to respect that outcome. And so most people would rather not be there, right? You don't want to have a conflict that results in going to court.
Right.
I mean, I think that's really understandable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because and I want to bring this in because it reminds me when I asked you that question. I remember when Justice Richard Bernstein got on the court. One of the things that he did that stood out was he did an outreach to prisoners, people who are incarcerated. And it was seen as out of the norm by a lot of people, like, wow, okay, you have a Supreme Court justice going to the prison system, talking to people who are already incarcerated. I'm just curious, though, in terms of when you get on the court, are there specific outreaches that you want to do that are not within the traditional confines or the traditional role of the court as this established institution?
Mm-hmm. I don't have a specific, here's a population I'd like to reach out to. I do think
but
that.
Is that something that's within your thinking, given that you're coming from a juvenile justice background, that accounts for a significant part of your background?
Yeah, so I think what I bring from that background and how I've tried to run my campaign is to be sort of, if someone asked me to be there, to say yes. And I think that, making sure that our justices are available, that they can, obviously you can't speak about issues before the court, but, you can, be available to high schools, or you can be available to, to institutions in our society that maybe demystify the law a little bit, or make it, a little less
accessible, more
scary,
Right. Two more questions for you before we let you go. The trust in our institutions, we've seen an erosion, whether it's the independence of the judiciary has come under attack nationally. Of course, we have this imposing political climate we're dealing with nationally. The judiciary has come under attack. And there's a lot of mistrust within our institution, whether it's a political institution, the judiciary. We talk about here the ever-growing need of a free and independent press, something I talked about at the National Press Club a couple of weeks ago when I hosted a forum there with U.S. Senator Peters. But my question to you is, how do you feel about the fact that this institution, this judiciary that is so well regarded, revered, despite, the impact it may have had on people negatively and positively, has now come under suspicion, people who have a deep distrust of the judiciary now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that, one thing that our state Supreme Court and our state courts, we do have binding judicial canons, right? So we have like a governing system. We have, some other things. We have a system where people vote for their state Supreme Court justice. And so they have the ability, and they vote for, judges up and down the ballot, right? So we have some checks that I think are not seen in other places. I hope that people express their opinions on the, who they should have on their Michigan Supreme Court, and that, that's not the same in every state, but here people have the opportunity to do that. Of course, it's on the nonpartisan section of the ballot, but, people can say, that I actually don't like the way that this judge or judicial system or whatever is headed. And so they can exercise that through their right to vote. And so, I know it's not a perfect check, but
Right.
it is an important one.
Right. And finally, which perhaps I think is one of the most important questions that people are asking is as a legal practitioner, as one who teaches law, and given the background that you bring to the court, and you're now looking to be among those members of the Michigan Supreme Court, what, in your view, should or makes a good justice of the Michigan Supreme Court?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to clerk for a federal circuit court judge after law school.
Okay.
And I really learned, his name was Argyll Cole. He's on the Sixth Circuit. And I learned a lot from him about my ideal of what a judge should be. And so what I was able to observe from him was, of course, like a tremendous intellectual rigor, so making sure I, as his law clerk, was just doing fantastic research. But it was also a time when the Sixth Circuit bench had some disunity, and he was really interested in trying to bridge those gaps across parties, across personalities, and thought that that was really important for people's trust in our court system. And so I would say that's another piece that I think is really important.
Right.
And then he was, for me, just a tremendous mentor and model in terms of how he treated everyone around him, including his clerks, including the cleaning staff, including everyone who he interacted with. He didn't have this attitude that I'm, because I'm this important judge, that I'm better than everyone around me. And so I really look to him as a model of what I think I would like to be as a state Supreme Court justice.
All right. And one more final question to go. Are there any reforms, any changes you would like to see when it comes to juvenile justice in Michigan?
Yeah, so there are a number of reforms that have been recently passed and are due to be implemented. I'm very excited to see, what comes of those. So the Juvenile Justice Task Force issued a number of recommendations, mostly unanimous. Many of those were passed into law. Many of those are currently being implemented. And so it's really exciting to have, sort of worked collaboratively with people to sort of see those and to see what they are going to look like in the world now. So I am, watching with anticipation and hoping that they have the impact that we wanted them to make.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kimberly Ann Thomas.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.